Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence is one of the most powerful ideas to ever shape human history. It was not merely a political strategy, not just a tool against the British Empire, but a way of life, a principle rooted in the very essence of what it means to be human. To understand Gandhi's nonviolence, we must first look at the man himself. Born in 1869 in Porbandar, India, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was an ordinary child in many ways, timid, shy, even fearful of the dark. And yet, within him, there was a seed of deep moral questioning. From his mother, he absorbed lessons of simplicity, devotion, and vegetarianism, and from his religious environment, he was exposed to Jain, Hindu, and Buddhist traditions that emphasized compassion toward all living beings. These early influences planted in him the idea that life must be respected in all its forms, and that true strength lies not in domination, but in restraint. When Gandhi traveled to London to study law, he encountered new worlds of thought, Christianity, Western philosophy, and the writings of figures like Tolstoy, Thoreau, and Ruskin. Each of these shaped his thinking, particularly the idea that love, truth, and civil disobedience could transform society more profoundly than violence ever could. Later, in South Africa, where he lived for over 2 decades, Gandhi faced racial discrimination and injustice firsthand. It was there that he began experimenting with the idea of satyagraha, a term he coined that means truth force or soul force. For Gandhi, nonviolence was not passive submission. It was not cowardice. It was an active, courageous confrontation with injustice, rooted in truth. Violence may silence an enemy temporarily, but nonviolence, he believed, could transform the heart, awakening humanity even in the oppressor. Nonviolence, or ahimsa as Gandhi called it in the Indian tradition, was not simply the absence of violence. It was a deep spiritual principle. To Gandhi, ahimsa meant more than refraining from harming others physically. It meant refusing to harbor hatred, anger, or revenge, because even these inner emotions were forms of violence. If we are to build a just and peaceful world, Gandhi argued, we must begin by disarming our hearts. The true battlefield is within. He once said that nonviolence requires more bravery than violence, for it is far easier to strike in anger than to restrain one's hand and respond with love. Throughout his life, Gandhi put this principle into action. In South Africa, he led campaigns against discriminatory laws, urging Indians to resist unjust taxation and identity passes not with riots or bloodshed, but with peaceful defiance, boycotts, and an unshakable commitment to truth. He believed that when large numbers of people refuse to cooperate with injustice, even the mightiest empire cannot stand. His experiments there laid the foundation for the massive civil resistance he would later lead in India. When Gandhi returned to India, he found a nation restless under British rule. The empire seemed invincible, and yet Gandhi understood something profound: empires survive not because of their weapons, but because people obey them. If obedience is withdrawn, not through violent rebellion, but through mass non-cooperation, the empire collapses from within. And so Gandhi mobilized millions with an idea more powerful than guns: refuse to cooperate with your own oppression. Boycott foreign cloth. Refuse to pay unfair taxes. March peacefully in defiance of unjust laws. His Salt March of 1930 became one of the most iconic demonstrations in history. Instead of attacking British forces, Gandhi walked 240 miles to the Arabian Sea, picked up a handful of salt, and declared independence from colonial exploitation. It was a simple act, yet it shook the foundation of the empire. The British responded with arrests, beatings, and imprisonment, but Gandhi and his followers refused to retaliate. The world watched in awe as unarmed protesters faced armed soldiers with nothing but courage and conviction. It was a living demonstration that nonviolence, when practiced with discipline and faith, could challenge even the most powerful rulers on earth. But Gandhi's nonviolence was not only a political weapon. It was a way of life, a spiritual discipline. He lived with radical simplicity, spinning his own cloth, eating modest meals, and committing himself to truth in every aspect of daily existence. He believed that one cannot preach nonviolence in the streets while living a life of greed or indulgence at home. For Gandhi, self-discipline was essential. True freedom begins not with overthrowing rulers but with mastering oneself. If one cannot control anger, fear, or desire, one is still a slave, no matter who governs the land. His philosophy also extended to the idea of universal love. Gandhi often said that his nonviolence was not directed only at oppressors like the British but at everyone, because the goal was not to defeat enemies but to turn them into friends. Violence seeks to destroy, but nonviolence seeks to convert, to awaken the humanity of the other side. Even when he was imprisoned, Gandhi wrote letters to his jailers with respect, trying to touch their conscience rather than provoke hatred. This vision of love in action is what gave his movement its moral force. People could see that Gandhi was not after power, revenge, or domination. He was after truth, dignity, and justice for all. Of course, nonviolence was not without criticism. Some argued that it was too idealistic, too slow, or even ineffective in the face of ruthless violence. Gandhi was often told that only bloodshed could free India. Yet, he remained firm in his conviction that violence may win battles but never peace. Violence breeds cycles of hatred and retaliation, while non-violence plants seeds of reconciliation. He admitted it was not an easy path. In fact, he often called it the path of the brave, because it required immense courage to face bullets, batons, and prison without striking back. To him, cowardice was worse than violence. If the choice was between violence and cowardice, Gandhi said he would choose violence, but the higher path, the nobler path, is non-violence. What makes Gandhi's philosophy so enduring is that it did not die with him. His ideas inspired some of the greatest movements of the 20th century. Martin Luther King Jr. adopted Gandhi's methods in the American Civil Rights Movement, showing the world that peaceful protest could dismantle systems of segregation and racism. Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu drew from his vision in the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. Even today, movements for justice around the world, from climate activism to democracy protests, echo Gandhi's legacy, proving that non-violence remains a living, breathing force in our times. But beyond politics, Gandhi's message carries a deeper challenge to each of us. In our daily lives, how often do we respond to conflict with anger, to disagreement with insult, to injury with revenge? Gandhi's non-violence calls us to a higher standard. It asks us to break the chain of reaction, to replace hostility with empathy, to see even those who hurt us as human beings worthy of compassion. Non-violence begins not on the streets but in the heart. It is a personal revolution as much as a political one. Consider for a moment how radical this idea is. In a world that glorifies power, weapons, and domination, Gandhi tells us that the true measure of strength is the ability to love in the face of hatred, to stand firm without striking back, to conquer not others, but oneself. His life shows that moral authority can be stronger than military might, and that one man, armed only with truth and courage, can awaken millions. Even his enemies came to respect him. Winston Churchill once mocked Gandhi as a half-naked Fakir, yet history remembers Gandhi as the giant, and Churchill as the politician who failed to grasp the power of conscience. And yet Gandhi was no saint in the sense of being flawless. He was human, with contradictions and failings. He struggled with doubts, with personal experiments that were controversial, with political compromises that sometimes disappointed his followers. But perhaps it is precisely this humanity that makes his philosophy even more powerful. Gandhi showed that greatness does not require perfection. It requires commitment to truth, willingness to grow, and courage to act with love even in the darkest times. As we look at our world today, Gandhi's non-violence feels more urgent than ever. We live in an age of polarization, conflict, and rising violence. Nations threaten one another with weapons of mass destruction. Political opponents treat each other as enemies. Social media amplifies anger and division. In such a world, Gandhi's voice reminds us that hatred only multiplies suffering, while love and non-violence hold the power to heal. His challenge is simple but profound: if we truly desire peace, we must be peace. If we want justice, we must practice justice in how we treat others. If we want to change the world, we must first change ourselves. Gandhi's legacy is not a set of dogmas but an invitation. It is an invitation to live differently, to resist the easy path of retaliation, to believe that truth and love are stronger than violence and fear. It is an invitation to build a world where conflicts are solved not by bloodshed but by dialogue, where dignity is upheld for all, where humanity rises above hatred. His life was his message, and that message continues to echo across generations. Imagine for a moment if more of us applied his philosophy in our daily lives. Families torn by anger might find reconciliation. Communities divided by hatred might rediscover unity. Nations at odds might step back from destruction and choose dialogue over war. Gandhi's nonviolence is not just history. It is a living possibility. The choice is ours. The question is whether we have the courage to embrace it. As Gandhi himself once said, "An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind." And in that warning lies the heart of his teaching. Violence, whether physical, verbal, or emotional, blinds us to the humanity of others. Nonviolence opens our eyes to see beyond fear and hatred. It allows us to see the other not as an enemy, but as a fellow human on the same journey of life. Gandhi proved that even in the face of the greatest empire on earth, this vision is not only possible, it is powerful enough to change history. And if it changed history once, it can change it again. So, as we sit here today, reflecting on Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence, let us not think of it only as a lesson from the past, but as a guide for the present and the future. Each of us holds the power to embody ahimsa in our own lives, to choose compassion over cruelty, patience over anger, understanding over judgment. Nonviolence is not weakness. It is strength at its highest. And in a world yearning for peace, it may be the most revolutionary act of all.